Hi.
Hi. Hi, guys. Oh, gosh. It's so amazing to see so many of you today. We are thrilled, really. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for coming. We are going to present you our perspective of the non-verbal side of the narrative. We really tried to make the presentation in a non-verbal way. We even practiced pantomime, but
Yeah.
we failed.
It turned out that we suck at pantomime.
Definitely. So
Sorry.
maybe next time. And today we are going to be a bit supported with our vocal apparatus and use some kind of words in communication with you. So sorry for that, but we will do our best.
Yep.
Okay. My name is Maria Piątkowska. I'm currently working as a senior narrative designer at Flying Wild Hog.
And I am Sławomir Uliash, and I am working as a lead narrative designer at Reikon games.
And we are also responsible for writing at some phases of game production.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's true. As it's customary. So, yeah, we did a bunch of games. We could talk about them for hours, but we just prefer to show you pretty pictures.
Yeah, we want to share some knowledge of our experience when working on those titles. We want to do it in a show non-verbal way. You will wait for that. But in case of our everyday job and our everyday life, our responsibilities and job can look like that. And every writer can understand that, I hope.
Yeah.
But also, our job can look like that. Every designer feels us right
Yeah.
now. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Okay. To be on the same page all together, we created some sort of agenda, and we want to start with some basics to make and establish the difference between the story, the plot, and the narrative. And the narrative will be our main focus, our key of the presentation, and that moves us also to the storytelling, which is also connected to the narrative itself. Then we would like to focus on this aspect of showing and why the heck not telling. And then we're going to start some sort of experiment. We're going to tell you about those ways of showing in theory, but then we're going to make it also in practice. And then we're going to end up with a brave conclusion.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so
So,
from the top, people.
Yeah. Let us start.
Yeah, starting with the basic things that we want to establish when moving to this narrative within the ways of communication, we need to explain some basics, like the difference between the story and the plot. As you see, the first example is the story, which is actually the thing that those set of events are most often presented chronologically, but not with a cause and relation vibe. Then we have the plot that enters and glues together all those events in the story. So we have the important word so that actually moves to the cause and effect relationship between the events. This is the basics. Sometimes, and well, most often, those two terms are used simultaneously. This is important to know the difference, but of course, when you will hear people talking, when you will hear, conversations at work, anytime you can hear that story is the same as plot. It's not, but we narrative designers and writers, we have this mission to establish this difference and to know that this difference is important. And then we have the last component, which is the narrative. Short and quick disclaimer, see that narrative comes from the Latin word tell, which we are going to delve into more later on. This would be important. But the narrative is this exposition of events that have occurred or are supposed to occur. So this is all the how when you think of presenting the events in your story. And of course, from this narrative, we came up with this term like narrative design, which is the set of all items that are parts of a story, and they are done accordingly to some rules and guidelines. Oh my God, what is it? This is the
I can show now. I told you.
show, don't
You're
tell.
telling I'm showing.
So the narrative is the all how of the presenting the events. And this is the main clue of our presentation, so the narrative. Let's go on. Just quick summary, story, plot, and narrative. We have the story, which is the who and what. So these are those events connected to the character and their actions. They can be, as I said, chronologically, but non with the relation cause and effect. Then we have the plot. So click. So the why. So all the motivations standing behind the actions done by the character. And we have the narrative, which is the how, and this is the most important clue. And we have, oh, not yet. We have this term storytelling, which will be very important today, and from which we will be jumping into those narratives and showing the ways of presenting the events and things in the game world. So, as you see, storytelling has this root, has this stem tell in its term inside, which is important because whenever someone says storytelling, he is a storyteller or she is a storyteller, and they are storytelling, most often people will associate storytelling with telling. So, using words, using phrases, and this oral art of presenting the stories, the set of events, and so on. But actually, storytelling is a broader term. It actually includes also the narrative. So the way, the how of presenting the stories, the set of events. So, of course, according to the given medium, it can be different. It can be various in a various way. But storytelling is a process of conveying the story, of representing and of revealing information. As you see, the term tell also indicates. And, yep, when we go to the past, when we think of our ancestors, we actually, predecessors, we actually see that people always, since forever, they use some visual aspects to support their narratives, their stories, their way of presenting some facts and events. So we have this, we had and we still have this pantomime, which can be also the origin of the sign language. So the gestures, it's also a way of presenting the facts, the stories, the events. We had those pictograms and other visual elements like other pictures and so on, icons. So they were also the origin of process of forming the language. So to sum up, we see that since the very beginning of our history, we use also the pictures, the symbols, the visual aspects to support our ways of communication.
As well as pantomime.
As well as pantomime, of course. Click. So this is important, and taking all this topic about showing and not telling, we focused on this very answer. Why? From the perspective of a game designer in the game medium, why we insist on showing and not telling. And
or not just telling.
Or not just telling, yes. And when you see the picture, you already connect the dots. This is the context of a riot, rebellion, people fighting with governmental forces, let's say. And you don't know the motivation. The motivation can be different, but already when you see it, when you experience essentially, when you see, you connect the dots and you create somehow of the context and you feel the vibe, the atmosphere, and the probable history story behind this scene, right? So this is the first thing, the processing of sensually of the given elements. Then, we have this experiment called Invisible Gorilla. Some of you may know it, so probably you won't catch what's the most important here, but some of you may not be familiar with it, so please take a look and focus on the task given in the film.
Why? I'm trying my best, just not working.
Okay.
No movies?
Aiuto? Help? Why isn't it working?
Yeah, we can tell you instead of showing.
We can even present.
No? So there is this experiment. You need to count the times when the white team are passing the ball to each other. And you are focusing on counting when they are passing the balls. And in the midst of the movie, suddenly the gorilla appears and walks through the scene. And usually when you see it for the first time, you don't notice the gorilla. But it works just for the first time because afterwards you always see the gorilla. Yeah, so we can...
Happens. Okay. So yeah, when you count the passages between the team, there are 15, but it's not the point. You had to see the gorilla. Yeah. Okay. Unfortunately. Taking into account and summing up of those examples, let's say, presented earlier on, this is our opinion, our perspective on why this is important to show. Because the limited ability to focus. When you are, when player, when audience is doing something, he or she exclude other elements that can distract him, right, or her. So when he experiences a player, for example, he is navigating through the space in a level. He is focused on the objective. He's focused on the things that he has to do and experience. So he would be like omitting things that would distract him, right? Because the ability to focus. And also people, players, get tired on focusing on several things, on things that he or she does. So this is also exhausting. And processing sensuality, what does it mean? Actually, when you get the information that, imagine the riot in the very city center of Warsaw, you have to process those information and make a context in your head. Just imagine the scene that may look like. So when you are told this information, you have to process it. And it's much slower when you see the picture and you already connect the dots and you much faster essentially process the information and get the context of the scene. And last but not least, of course, I think the most important, experience. You want to feel, you want to be engaged, you want to immerse in the things you are doing. You don't want to be lectured. Oh God, please.
No, well, actually, as you can see, we need to tell you all the movies we embedded for some reason. So in this movie, Loang, a protagonist of Shadow Warrior 3, is playing with the toy dragon, showing that the dragon appear and destroy the world. And, you know, he got this awful toy of a dragon made out of a garbage, basically. And he's in his underwear and making a, you know...
it's a funny scene.
Yeah, joke of himself. So, yeah.
Believe me.
That's what happened in this movie. But then we've got another movie for you. And in this very movie, we are actually showing you the epic dragon that appears and destroys the world. And at the end, Loang is turn out that Loang is on the dragon. So yeah, that's.
So you see the dragon. Yeah, actually, like a spoiler. Actually, that's right. It actually released. It was released like last year. So.
If you didn't play it
take
yet,
a look. Yes,
it's your own fault.
The whole first level is actually consists of walking and
jumping,
fighting on the
and what's not
body of a badass dragon, right? So we have in the first place we got this message from Loang, who is lecturing the player that okay, this is the backstory and the dragon appeared, right? And then we quickly see the dragon himself and how he actually destroys the world. So when we talk about ways of showing, actually, the most important and the most popular also way of showing is the environmental storytelling. Everyone, when it comes up to speaking about ways of showing and about replacing the words with the visuals, everyone tells about the environmental storytelling. And of course, you can read it, you can experience, and you can find any information about the environmental storytelling, which is the art of arranging the objects so that the player can know the story behind the backstory, can connect the dots, and also be informed more about the lore. For example, when we have this, when we have this level art supporting the lore and story in Portal 2, we have those drawings. Fortunately, it's not the movie. We have those drawings, we have those pictures that when the player goes through the level, he sees it, and it actually, they suggest the story, the events that happened after the first part of the portal, so it presents what actually was done by the player and what was happening after defeating the main boss, right? So we have these drawings that clearly represent the story. Then, apart from the environmental storytelling, we also have the systems and the game design, the mechanics that also support to convey the story itself. So the narrative can be also showed, can be also represented to the player by the game systems. And, oh Jesus, this is a movie.
Yeah, and this is the movie. And in this movie, there is a couple arguing with each other, but there are actually no words spoken, no even one. Everything is shown by these, balloons, these balloons in the color of red. And when the balloon appears, it's first white, but then there is like a puzzle inside with a different ending of the puzzles, like puzzle blocks. And they're connecting to each other and making a balloon. And as the arguments become more heated, the shapes become more jagged, more sharp, and they are connecting faster, and the balloons appear faster. It's an awesome, marvelous movie. You got to see it.
Yeah, actually, in this in this game, there are almost no words. Yes, and the more we delve into the conflict between the characters, we see the tempo of those balloons appearing on the screen. We also see that those edges get sharper. We also see that they are red, so also the color suggests the aggressive tone of the conflict between the characters. So this is a kind of a system, a mechanic that is delivered to the players, and it's also supported by UI and all user experience. Then, God, not the film, please. Okay, so taking into consideration all those facts and examples and the theory of portraying the story through the narrative, of showing the narrative through other senses than just hearing the words or reading, we want to a bit improvise right now.
Yeah, let me. I
Sure.
got warmed up already. Yeah, so, okay. Imagine that we are making a game, right? And you as a player, you are space miner, and you are traveling through the vast asteroid field, collecting all kind of ore that you need to sell to the buyers, and it's hard for you, it's hard life, and yeah, it's dangerous. It's dangerous out there. Your only means of communication is old radio that is barely working. So yeah, this is the setup. And yeah, was it good? Was it entertaining? Maybe a bit, just a bit. No, I think we can do better.
Yeah, definitely. I should rewind you right now and take into account that you were told the story, right? You were told, you read some things on the screen, and Sławek was telling you a story. But if we rewind to the beginning.
Sure. So you are a miner, space miner even, right? You got a spaceship in which you are flying and spending most of your life, and you are traveling through the vast and beautiful vistas of an asteroid field. And well, it's a dangerous life. You can end up as a flaming wreck pretty fast. So yeah, and this is how concept art supported me better, right? But, well, it's not only about art. We told you about the game design, game systems. So as a miner, you probably need to sell what you uncovered, what you mined. So yeah, we've got like all systems for selling, but they're not really narrative. We can push it further. So let's say that you're in debt, right? And every time you sell your goods, 80% of your income is owned by the corporation. So it pushes you to fly further, to uncover more rare ores that are more valuable, and you need to sell it just to make ends meet. But your ship is like really decrepit. It's old, prone to all kind of damage. It's prone to accidents, so you basically risk your life and limb just doing it. But that's all was a game system that pushed you to do this. So yeah, and art, right? No, level design. No systems will go far without a good canvas. And levels are like a really good canvas. So, as we said before, the asteroid field is vast, and it takes time to travel through it. It makes you really lonely. It plays well on the isolation themes. But then there is a lot to uncover on this in this asteroid field. There are natural caverns that are filled with the goods, and the relic spaceship full of mysteries, or old mining rigs that you can use, and everything else you can imagine. Yeah, art. But this field needs to be pretty, right? Because if you are playing an ugly game, you are not so immersed in it. So yeah, here comes our design. So let's say the asteroids at first are pretty nice, round balls of rock, and basked in this bluish hue of a nearby stars. It's all good, and a lot of good things can happen. But you need to go further, and the further you're going, the rocks become more cyclopean, more jagged, more dangerous looking, and the hue of the star becomes more reddish, more menacing, more dangerous. And yeah, the ore itself, the thing you are after, should be visible, should be tempting you, glowing with the inner light, like a siren song. It plays on your grid. You want to risk for it. You want to mine it because it's beautiful. You need it. So the ships and everything else, it's not as beautiful as the ore. They are decrepit. They are patched up. They are old because the system in which you are, it's far away, and you need to feel isolated in it, right? So, yeah. After that, we've got UI, of course. This is, the good UI is a make or a break for the narrative. It can either immerse you into the story, or it can eject you out of it. So let's say that in this game, everything you see is through your own eyes for the greater dimension. So if you want any kind of a menu, you need to HUD on your helmet, or you need a HUD on your computer screen. But they need to be mostly the same as the rest of the ship. So probably they will look retro sci-fi-ish, like DOS letters with a greenish hue, blinking, not reliable, ready to fail you, like everything around you, right? And to add even more to this, we'll give you a depth meter. Every time you are looking at UI, you are seeing your depth that is slowly rising or slowly falling. Depends on how you play. But the depth is here. And speaking about depth, well, sadly no movies, but imagine that suddenly the corporation ship appears. It's, engines wailing like sea beasts of old. Yeah.
I can
and,
sing.
Yeah, and it's after you because it wants to collect your taxes or maybe even enforce you to give away all of your goods. So you can either comply or you can run away, you can hide, you can be shot at. There's a lot of tension here, just using these marvelous sounds that we had for you in store. Yeah, and the sounds are for the beautiful movie Greyhound, which is a war movie about a convoy of ships trying to make through the Atlantic, and U-boats are hunting them. And every time the U-boat appears, there is a kind of a wailing, a little bit like a wail or howl of the wolves. It's a really unnerving sound, and it fits perfectly. Even if U-boats don't actually howling themselves. But yeah, well, I can talk a little bit more about the sounds here, but we are sadly not hearing them. But you can imagine that you can use sounds as a way of communicate, like radio, like we said before, that you got like old radio. And further that you are from the home station, the less you can hear through them because of the white noise. So eventually you need to revert to, I don't know, text messages to communicate with everyone around you. And you're isolated. You can hear like voices around you, like let's say someone banging on the hull of the ship. And when you hear it, you suddenly realize it's a Morse code and somebody is telling you something. But when you look outside, well, there is no one else there. And maybe it's just your mind playing tricks on you because you are so far away from the civilization. You're isolated.
So when we compare those
Sorry, I got carried away.
two attempts of conveying the story, the way of storytelling of Sławek, the first one, it was told and supported with the lines on the screen you see about the fantasy of a miner, about the spaceship that he actually uses to travel through the space and asteroids and so on. Then we had the films, but through the visual aspects, it actually supported the frame, the vibe, the feeling of the character that you actually saw, the spaceship that probably would be there, would be his system of traveling and the vehicle of traveling, and everything around that the space is arranged, the asteroids and so on, and the possible system of exchange those resources, let's say, the ore and so on. It actually all was put into one narrative. And those tiny visual aspects generally changed a bit the narration of Sławek. So imagine if you use all those elements, components, like sound, art, concept art, systems, UI, together. Imagine how it would be looking like and how the player would experience this story with those ways of showing in an actual game. Because we actually came up with a conclusion that if we lift all together, we are some sort all the narrative designers. Because building the narrative is the team effort. It depends on the close collaborations between the departments. We have to be still in contact with other teams, and we have to make sure that the story would be conveyed through the ways that the player can see, can feel, can experience.
And we cannot do it alone.
Yes.
We need you, all of you, to lift with us, right?
And we have to remember about the possible available narrative tools we can use, because there are some production or technological limits in every company, right? So we have to first make sure that we know what we can use in our game project. And, of course, don't lecture the player. Let him experience, because after all,
Well,
it's actually all
about players.
the players.
And the players are Chad, as
Yeah.
we all know it.
So keep that in mind. And sorry for not displaying the videos and other sounds. It
But
worked
I
earlier.
tried my best.
Yeah, it worked earlier. So
Yeah.
we just told you how it would in the ideal world, in the perfect world, it should look like, because it's all a team effort, and it's very important to know that the narrative is the way of exposing the set of events, the items, the elements of the story within a game. So it's not only the plot. And yeah, thank you very much. We have a lot of time.
Yeah?
Hi, guys. First of all, a great talk. I was really impressed how you managed to convey the value of show, not tell, by telling, not showing. Pretty impressive stuff. Currently, we are working on a roguelike deck builder. That's a game that has quite a large focus on procedurally generated content. Yeah. And I'm wondering, what should we in particular focus on when we have very limited influence over what player sees and does due to content being generated procedurally? So what should we focus on when we can't really control everything the player sees and does to show and not tell?
Okay, it's a really good question, and but it's, you know, like, sure. Opening the can of worms, because you can do a lot of stuff. First of all, you can focus on your backstory and let the player uncover the backstory during all their runs as the, in which they are inevitably dies and start over. But like these pieces of story will stick to them. They will know, right? So you can even make this story like a key to actually pass through the game. But you can also go further. You can also go with the procedurally generated narratives, which are, well, they're really fascinating, but it's, something for totally different talk than right now.
Yeah, just engage also in the game systems, right? And actually, the backstory of the character, as you said, it can be a really cool part to explore during the whole story, right? So it's not that the backstory is written in some kind of logs or collectibles or anything. You can just, re-experience them in the cutscenes, for example, like in the last game of Jedi, right? When his backstory was, and the approach to the final, his mentor, was actually explored during the game when
Whoa.
he had...
No spoilers.
Sorry.
I haven't played it yet.
The retrospectives, for example, right? So
Retrospectives, let's stick to them.
Make also, let's say, playable or visible the backstory of the character, if it's so important. And if yes, then just go to the retrospectives and find the ways to show, to let the player experience it, to delve into it, to feel and to engage in it. Maybe he or she would have some, impact on this, right? So
make a systems that tell the story, as we told you, showed you here, or told you how to show.
You're willing to show.
Yeah, we were willing to show you. So yeah, but as I told you, it's a can of worms. I can talk for hours, but maybe someone else have other questions.
Is it enough, Tomek? Oh, I know your name.
Oh. But it was an accident. Lucky guess.
You have the information, so show don't tell, it's the bad.
Okay.
So maybe I introduce myself too. I'm Julia, and I'm a writer that aspires to be a narrative designer. And I have a question for you because you are experienced narrative designers, and I wanted to know whether you've noticed some mistakes that beginner narrative designers do, and maybe how to solve them, what to focus on.
That's a topic.
Yeah.
You want to start chronologically or alphabetically?
The mistakes, we learn on our mistakes.
Hopefully.
Yes, of course, as we made them. The first mistake the narrative designer or writer, most likely writers do, is not playing their own games.
Yeah.
Like, you need to play your game a lot. You need to know it, you need to feel it, you need to, know every aspect of them. Because otherwise, the story and the narrative are different from the gameplay. It's like a big mistake, because this connection between these two parts is something that kills all the narratives. And actually, it can affect gameplay in a bad way as well. That depends on what players are focusing on.
And actually, I will start answering you from both perspective of a writer and a narrative. The reason is that those functions are treated simultaneously very often. I bet as a narrative designer you also write. Of course, you do. Yeah. So from the writer's perspective, I think the most important mistake that we as writers do is that we think our story, every element of the story, of the plot, should be in the game. And there's this very important sentence, what's not in the game, it's not in the game. And as writers, we love to explore and elaborate on backstories or on character features, on other, let's say, stories of the backstories, right? So writing the lore elements that are important, but they are not so important. They are not essential for the experience of the player also. And sometimes we just, overwhelm the designers with our ideas, which we want to incorporate in the game, but no one would incorporate them in the game because they have, more important tasks to incorporate. Like, for example, I don't know, combat one-liners, let's say, right? Or just other things connected with the mechanic of the game, right? So, and we think when we write, moving on, when we write the scenario, the more we write, the more we also refer in those scenarios to some things that we believe would end up in the game, but they will not be in the game in the end, right? Because just for some reason, because of the production, because of the technological capabilities, they will not be in the game in the end. And we are sometimes so focused on those things that we don't remember to edit and correct those scenarios. And sometimes these are those artifacts that just stay in the scenarios, in the dialogue lines, in the cutscenes, and refer to something that is not actually in the game. So a writer should definitely be on the same page with the designers. If something is not in the game, if something changes, and it changes a hell lot during the game production, we have to be aware of that. What changes, why it changes, or maybe not so important why, but what changes and changes into what, right? Maybe it was replaced by something and we have to also adapt to it, right? From the narrative designer perspective, because that was your actual question, I think as narrative designers, we also think of game capabilities, mechanic capabilities that we can deliver everything we want, taking also from the story, right? Because it's connected the most often. And the first thing we have to do, that we also said, is to establish a list of narrative tools that we can use. When we work with the cinematic designers, we have to know how many, for example, cutscenes there will be. we have to discuss it with them, right? So that they will know their pipeline, their production possibilities, the quality, and so on, the priorities, and so on, right? And if they say that, no way, it's not going to be an epilogue there, we have to, or either discuss or just accept the fact that there's no time or there's no sources for that, right? So if we have no cutscenes at all in our game because of reasons, we have to be aware of it. So I know it's simple when it comes to hearing me talking right now that establishing the narrative tools, simple thing, right? It's not that simple because in the way of process of creating a game, everything is in chaos from the beginning to the end. The game that you were preparing and making at the beginning of the production, it's not the same game at the end. So when you think of your story, when you think of delivering those stories, when you think of showing, not tell, and what actually you can show instead of tell, you have to be aware of the tools that you can use and not overuse, right? So it's, first of all, you have to do a list, I think. Yeah, this is something that is easy to do, but you have to do a list, you have to write it down, you have to reconsider, think it over again, and discuss it with other teams, definitely. So I think this is a big mistake because we just, believe something will be, and it apparently won't be.
And one more, but short for you. We do not engage the rest of the team in the process of developing of the narratives and the story. If it's done, it works miracles. If artists, designers, and what's not, they feel as a part of the creative team behind the narrative and the story, they will work better, they will do more, they will care about the narration or the story itself.
And last but not least...
Maybe someone else have got a question?
Last but not least, play your game. This is a mistake a writer does very often. A writer, narrative designer, because I don't think so. Well, maybe I will repeat because this is important. Okay. Play your game, because no one will care about things of story that are incorporated in the game more than you do, right? Designers have their own tasks. Concept artists have their own tasks. Programmers have their own tasks. So if you need to check if all that you created or write in the scenario is in the game, you have to check it. So play it, feel the context, experience if those one-liners are okay in this very passage, or you have to move it further, right? This is also an easy go, right? Because you think, okay, you're creating games, so you play games. It's not that easy. It's not that you actually play your game. So very often those writers, especially when they are freelancers, not working, for example, in the office. So far, everyone actually can work out of office, but they are not maybe feeling to be a part of the team, right? So when you play your game, you know what is in you, what of your work is in the game. So this is a very easy advice, but it's very, very important. I think we have, I hope it's enough. Okay, good. We have 1 minute, so maybe one question more.
Hey.
Hey.
I'm Vitek. Got a question for you. When it comes to designing details in a non-verbal way, I usually tend to overdo them because I really like those little things. But I tend to meet with the comments that the players won't notice them. So my question is, do you think it is worth doing little details? Like, for example, we have a character that does not drink as a character trait, but when he gets sad, he starts, drinking here and there. Do you think it's worth doing those little details,
totally.
Or the players won't
totally,
notice?
Because even if 80% players won't notice, 20% will, 10% will care, and 2% will make long videos about it on YouTube, which goes right to the sales.
Or not.
Right? It's how FromSoft works, right? Because they throw a lot of small details in the story. Like they are telling the stories through the small details. You can go through the cat from the descriptions of items, narratives in the background, in the world itself, like statues and whatnot. People are making these stories about it, and are getting so popular. So, and the same goes with Warframe and a lot of other works. Most of the games got their own wiki pages telling about the stories. And so, yeah, it's better to have them than not have them.
Actually, I would add also one thing. If the production and technological possibilities allows you to do it, sure. But please remember to make it coherent. If you are incorporating those small elements, those components that create, a general look, for example, of the character or his characteristic feature or something, if you decide to add those tiny elements, you have to be sure that they will not be visible, but they will be coherent with the way of presenting the character. Because if you do it once, so in the one scene, for example, you show this character that he's drinking when he is sad, he's drinking. And then for the rest of the game, which can be like, come on, a couple of hours or even more, it's not added there, and the player won't see it, he will just forget it, right? Yeah. So you have to be sure that this tiny element creates a coherent element of the story of the character background, right? And it's repeatable throughout the game, and the player, maybe he wouldn't notice it, but it's important to repeat it and to stick to the element of the character that is important and is coherent, right? It's not just out of the blue one time. It's just, it has his own flow and way, right?
And make
Context.
it important.
Yeah.
Do not put anything unimportant into the game. Everything you put into the game should be important.
Just remember about the context, right? And the context actually creates the frames for the player that he may or may not notice it, but you know the structure, that this element appears here and here, right? And there are some scenes that will explore this element, right?
We are out of time.
We are out of time, of course. I'm showing it.
Yeah. So, thank you guys.